In this video, I'm going to introduce a new data structure called a mapped data type. And recently we've been working with arrays and sequential data types. So basically arrays are a list of items that you can go through in order, starting from 0 and going up to the end of the array. Now a map lets us store different type of information that we want to look up not in order or based on a number, but based on a key. So the most important thing about a map is that it is a set of key value pairs. All right, so this is a data structure that allows us to map keys to values. You can think of it kind of like a dictionary or an index. So let's create a new variable called inventory. And we're going to use curly braces to define a new map. All right, so like the square brackets for an empty array, now we have an empty map. And we can add some things to it using the square bracket notation, but instead of a number, we're going to give it a key. And let's say we have apples, and in our inventory, we've got 10 apples. All right. And then we want to add another key, inventory oranges. And here we have 8 oranges. All right. So I'm just going to run this, and it creates this. So we over here in the console, we can type inventory, and we can see that we have this map. And then if we want to get one of those values back out, we can do inventory apples, like that. Okay. Now, as well, if we want to change the value that's in there, we can do inventory, maybe we ate an apple. It's 9. So here we have it. We can assign values into it, and we can access values using the key. Now we're using strings for keys, but they don't need to be strings. All right, and any valid JavaScript value, so any type, can be a key. We could use a number, we could use a Boolean operator, we could use one of the special values like undefined, we could use an object, we could use another map or an array as the key, but often we're going to use strings like this because they make nice keys. One thing to keep in mind, we can say the key doesn't need to be just a simple word. The key could be something like cans of peaches, and we have 5 cans of peaches. All right. Now, if we want to create a map that has initial values, we can use this shortcut syntax. And we already defined inventory, so we don't use let again. We're just going to reassign a new map to inventory. We could say apples, 8 oranges, 4 peaches, not cans of peaches, but we'll say cans of peaches. 5 and plums. 12. All right. So that's our inventory, and we assigned it all in one line. We could also, if we want, we could do it on multiple lines like this, and if we had a lot of items, in fact, we probably have enough items to do this. And I usually like to line up the curly braces just like this, the same way we would with another block of code. So we indent the items inside of it, and just note that the last one doesn't have a comma, and all the other items do. All right, so now we created inventory with all of these items in it. All right, all in one shot. So we've been calling these maps, and that's what I'll continue to call it, except when I forget. But there's a convention in JavaScript of using JavaScript's object as a map. Right? So JavaScript actually has a map data type, but it's much more common to just use objects as a data type. And we're not going to be creating our own objects in this chapter, but we've been using objects for all along. Like we know math.py is an object. So math is an object, and it has data like pi, but it also has functions like floor, right? So an object can combine data, and it can combine functions. And a better example might be the date object. So if we want a date, I can create a new date like that. All right. And then this date has specific data of the time that it was created. But this is an aside. We're focusing on maps. But one nice thing about using maps is we get to use that dot notation. The same way we can do math.py, we can use dot notation to access our variables. So we can do inventory.apples, and we can reassign it a new value like this. All right. So now, if we show inventory, our apples are 10, and we can, if we just want the apples, we can call it like that. And we can even use our shortcut operators like this to add more apples. All right, so that's a nice thing about we get a nice compact syntax using the dot operator. But one thing, we can't do cans of peaches. Let me get an error here, because cans of peaches is not a valid JavaScript identifier. So if I want to get cans of peaches, I always need to use the full syntax. All right. So that's the dot operator, and you'll see it a lot. You'll see it in my examples. You also see it in code and examples you look up online. Now, sometimes we want to know if an item exists inside of our map. So JavaScript gives us, well, let's just check. Inventory. Do we have any berries? Right? It's undefined. So JavaScript gives us a new operator called in, which will specifically check to see if a key exists in a map. Sorry, but I didn't use it right there. So what we do is we say, are there any berries in the map inventory? And it's going to return true or false. So it's false for berries, but true for apples. So we could use that in a Boolean expression like this. If berries in inventory, then console.log. We're going to use our backtick string template. You have to print a message, and then we say else. A different message. All right. So here we're using the in operator, and it's a keyword. That's why Replic's making it blue, just like let or for. In is another keyword operator in JavaScript, and it's going to return true or false, depending if the key exists in the map. All right. So Now that we have the basics, we know how to create maps, either with an empty map or with a literal map like this. And we know how to access the values to assign to them or to get the value back out of them. We often are going to want to iterate through the map the same way we do with arrays. So here, what we're going to do is a basic map loop, but we're going to get all of the keys and then iterate through the keys to get the values. So first, let's get the keys. And we're going to use the built-in object, which has a keys function to get those keys. All right, so we're going to pass our inventory into object.keys, and it's going to return an array of just the keys. So let me just show you what this looks like over here. All right. So it gives us back an array of strings, and what we're going to do is go through each one of these and call it back out of inventory in order to get the value. All right, so let's do that loop. So I get 0, I less than keys.length, length, I plus plus. All right. So let's create a variable called k. That's just going to be a short one-letter variable for our key, and that will be keys at position I. And I like to do this just for clarity instead of using double scripted arrays where we say inventory keys I. We'll just use k. Now let's just print out a simple message, and we'll say we have k is the item, and then inventory k is the number of things in the inventory. So this is going to iterate through each of these, be apples, colon, and then the number of apples, oranges, colon, the number of oranges, and so on. All right. So let's run this and take a look. So there's our loop. Oh, and this is, sorry, no berries today. It's because there are no berries in the inventory. All right. So apples, oranges, cans of peaches, and plums. And we're going to do this loop like this many times. So there's a corollary to keys, and that is values. And instead of giving us the keys part of things, it gives us just the values as an array. And sometimes we'll want to do this where we don't care about the keys anymore and we just want the values. But I'm not going to iterate through them because there's no need for it with just this. We'll see some examples where we use a map to get a set of unique items. So let's say we wanted to know all the different first names in our contact list. We could put those first names into a map because they're as the key. And that way we know that we're never going to have more than one, because you can't put more of the same key inside of a map. All right. But now I want to show you something, a faster, quicker way to iterate through keys and values, and it's a for in loop, and it's specifically for doing this loop that we did up here. So we can say for let k in inventory. So this will give us each key in the inventory map. All right. And here we can do our same console.log, and it just saved us a little bit of time. All right. Let's just put a little space here. put a little space between them, and you'll see that they work the same way. But we have a more compact syntax here. So for let k in inventory, and then we get a variable k that has each key, and we can use that key to look up the value in the inventory. And many times this will be the preferred loop. But I'm going to show you, we're going to go back up here and change this loop. And I'll show you why we might want to get the keys first. And that is if we wanted to order the keys. So unlike an array, where order is very important, that's the main function of an array, to keep items in a sequential order that can be looked up based on their index, that is not the main function of a map. Maps want to be very fast at looking things up based on their key. So in that sense, the order of the keys is not guaranteed or predictable. With our small inventory map, all of the keys have been kept in the order that we added them, but that's not always the case. So if we want to get our items back out in a specific order, we need to purposefully do that. And one way might be to alphabetize our inventory. So to do that, we can get the keys, and then since it's an array, we can just call the sort function, the sort method of the array, to sort them. And now our first loop, and let's just copy this stuff. So our first loop will be sorted. All right. And the second one will just be in whatever order JavaScript is keeping our keys. So we get apples, cans, oranges, plums in alphabetical order. And here we just get them in the order that they came. Now, you can see apples, oranges, cans, plums. They're still in the order that we added them, but we get them sorted up here. Right. So that's it for our map basics. Let me just go over a couple things that we talked about. We have keys and values, right? And we call them key value pairs. That's the main function of a map. Maps are very useful for for storing any type of information that you want to look up based on a value. We've already used them a little bit in our chatbots that we wrote. We created a map of the data for it, where we had data.hello that held the string that was the hello message, or data.goodbye, which held the goodbye message, and so on. So we've already been using them a little bit, these map data structures, and we're going to look at a lot more uses for them as we finish out our tour through JavaScript here. So we've got keys and values. The curly braces create a map, and we can create an empty one, or we can create one with values already in it. The standard way to access the values is to put square brackets and then put the key inside of the square brackets. But if our key is a value, is a valid JavaScript identifier, we can just use the dot notation for it. We learned a new operator, in, which tells if a key is in a map and it returns true or false. And then we looked at a few ways to loop through maps. So that's it for this introduction to maps, and hopefully you have the basics now. And in the next video, we're going to look at a couple uses and how to put this to more practical use, how and when we would use a map data type.